Warning: this episode describes animal abuse. On July 29, 1993, a road worker was running a road grader in a rural area outside Ennis, Texas. As he got past a small bridge that crossed over Smith Creek, he noticed something out of place in the bushes. As he got closer, the stench of decomposition hit him and he realized he was looking at a dead body. He yelled to another employee that he had found a body, and one of them drove into town to use a phone to call the sheriff. Deputies and investigators soon arrived on the scene and hopped over a barbed wire fence to survey the discovery. The body was clearly of a young female, but both her head and her hands had been removed. Her nude torso had been cut open from the chest down to the pubic area. Some of her intestines were outside of her body, and there were multiple stab wounds on her thighs and genitals. Also, both of her nipples were missing. Officers began spreading out to search the area for evidence, most importantly the girl's head, hands, and clothing. Detectives knew that the body parts had not been removed by hungry animals, as they were cut off cleanly with no teeth marks. Those items wouldn't be found in the vicinity, but the search for them uncovered another very important piece of evidence: a second dead body. That one was of a fully clothed young male who was lying on the creek bed under the bridge. He wasn't an area that was easily accessible, so the fire department arrived and provided a ladder for the investigators to use. Upon further inspection, a hole in the boy's face made the likely cause of death a gunshot wound. Authorities didn't know the identities of the victims and had no idea if the cases were related, but it was clear that they were not natural deaths or accidents. Ellis County, Texas had at least one murderer amongst its population, and it would be revealed that these were not the first lives taken by the culprit. This is Monsters. Jason Massey was born on January 7, 1973 in Ennis, Texas, to Nancy Massey. The identity of his father isn't clear. Some accounts say that Jason never knew who his father was, and it was possible that Nancy wasn't even sure. There are some accounts that list his father as a man named Nelson Dean, and Jason would later claim his father was an alcoholic who abused him. So it's anybody's guess, and there really isn't anybody alive today who could clear that up. A friend of Nancy's at the time said that they would go out and party until about 2 in the morning up until she gave birth. Then they would go out with the baby asleep in the back seat of the car. In 1975, Nancy had another child, a daughter named Joanna. The children's lives were anything but stable. They moved around a lot due to unpaid rent and occasionally lived in Nancy's car. She didn't work regularly, and the children were punished with spankings with a wooden paddle. As they got older, they had to scrounge for food themselves and get themselves off to school. When Jason was 5 years old, a man who was babysitting him and his sister ended up molesting him. When the man tried to get Jason to perform oral sex on him, the boy hit him and ran away. The abuses that Jason suffered so early in his life caused him to develop violent sexual fantasies at a pretty young age. In 1982, when Jason was 9 years old, he was playing with a couple of brothers in a wooded area near the mobile home park where they lived. Jason suddenly grabbed one of the boys, ripped off his clothes, and tied him to a tree. He picked up a thin tree branch and began whipping the boy repeatedly, causing the child to scream in agony. The other boy ran to his home and told his mother what was happening, but by the time she got there, Jason was gone. The boy was still tied to the tree and his body was covered in red welts. The mother called the police, but they seemed to shrug it off, saying Jason was too young and the victim wasn't hurt that bad. After that, the mother tried to talk to Nancy about Jason's actions, but she couldn't be found. By then, Nancy was rarely at home and the children were taking care of themselves. It gave Jason the freedom to explore his dark fantasies. He really wanted to harm humans, but spent most of his time substituting them with animals. He killed the family cat not long before he had attacked the boy in the woods, and he would later admit that he loved the feeling. His dark thoughts continued to persist, as the only loving relationship he had growing up was with his grandmother, Sue Whitcliffe. In 1987, Nancy had another baby, a boy named Philip. When Jason was 16, he became obsessed with a 13-year-old girl who went to his school named Anita Mendoza. He called her randomly one day and claimed to have the wrong number, but before she hung up, he said he recognized her voice and tried to talk to her. She wasn't interested and blew him off. Jason called her again the next day, but she told him she wasn't interested in talking to him and asked him to stop calling her. Jason told her he wanted to be her boyfriend, but she said she already had a boyfriend and asked him to stop calling. At that point, Jason took the hint and stopped calling as a sign of respect toward Anita. No, of course he didn't. He started calling her all the time, asking her out, despite her continually turning him down and asking him to stop calling her. He stopped for a few days, probably hoping she would think he finally moved on, but then he called and told her she had a nice ass and that he wanted to have sex with her. Anita's parents called the police, but again they took a kids will be kids approach. Eventually the family moved and got a new phone number, which paused the harassment but didn't stop it. Jason wrote a letter to Anita and sent it to her old address, letting the U.S. Postal Service do his bidding for him by forwarding it to their new address. In the letter, he described a dream he had had where he grabbed her while she was taking the trash out and slit her throat. He also asked for her new number, told her he loved her, and asked her to write him back, evidence that he had not ever learned what a proper loving relationship was really like. Eventually, Jason got Anita's new number and started calling, sometimes a dozen times a day. Anita continued to hang up on him, but one time he was able to let her know that he wouldn't take no for an answer and told her, quote, "If I can't have you, nobody will." Not long after, Anita received a letter in the mail that she didn't realize was from Jason until after she had opened it. In the envelope, there was a picture of a woman with her head cut off and placed on her chest. Jason had written, quote, "This is how you will look when I get you alone." Worse than the violent threat, at the end of the letter Jason wrote, quote, "You looked beautiful at the movies," meaning he had been following her without her even realizing it. Jason continued to stalk Anita, showing up at places she went with her friends. He sent more letters with threats and one with pictures of Anita with a red substance that looked like blood smeared over her face. Anita did everything she could to avoid being alone, even at home. On August 4th, 1990, Anita arrived home from school to find her pet dog, Frosty, lying dead in the driveway of her house. It hadn't been a natural death or even an accident in the road. Someone had repeatedly smashed the dog's head into the concrete driveway until it was a bloody mess. Then Anita looked up and saw that someone had written a message on the back of her mother's car in the dog's blood. It said, quote, "Anita's dead." The police were called again, and again they did nothing. The family knew that Jason Massey was responsible for the death of their family pet, but the police said there was no evidence to prove it. Despite having multiple threatening letters signed by Jason, they didn't believe there was anything they could do about a boy who threatened to kill a young girl and then clearly executed their dog. Jason had begun keeping a journal in 1989, and it would become a very personal look at everything he would do over the next few years. Unfortunately, authorities didn't have access to the journal at the time, but on August 5th, Jason wrote about digging through garbage to find Anita's address, and then he wrote, quote, "I also went up to her back porch and grabbed a dog by the throat and strangled it, then beat its head against the concrete." He described using the blood to write the message on the back of the car, and he casually mentioned that he'd recently acquired a gun. Oh, good. Jason's hatred of women had started long before he started harassing Anita. It likely came from the relationship he had with his mother, who abused and neglected him. Jason spent years planning to rape, torture, and kill girls and women, claiming he wanted to become the most prolific serial killer ever known. He had spent time hiking around the woods looking for the perfect place to dispose of bodies. He thought he would be killing hundreds of people and he could find a secluded dumping ground that nobody would ever find. He even told himself that he would kill females from the age of 10 to 40 years old. Jason had been planning on killing for years. He just wanted Anita to be his first. Well, his first human. He had not only spent time in the woods looking for the perfect dumping spot, he had also used the seclusion to kill a number of animals. It was eventually believed that Jason had killed 38 cats and dogs and 5 cows in those woods. Jason would later claim that he engaged in sexual acts with the animal remains, eventually not being able to become aroused without some type of death involved. The only reprieve Jason had from his mother was when he went to live with a friend of his grandmother's named Roberta Adams. She took both Jason and Joanna into her home, but Joanna returned to her mother's home a few days later. That left Jason in a place where he had more structure and someone around who could steer him in the direction of becoming a productive member of society. When Roberta asked Jason what he wanted to do when he was an adult, he said he wanted to join the military. By then, Jason had dropped out of high school, so the Adamses contacted a local recruiter for advice and he told them he needed to get a GED. For those of you who aren't from the US, the school system there is less strict than other countries. It depends on the state, but there are a lot of states that don't do much in the way of school truancy. A kid can skip a lot of school and even drop out without much government intervention. If you happen to do that but want to move on to something that requires a high school diploma like the military, community college, or certain jobs, you can take what's called the General Educational Development Test, or GED. It's a test that shows you have the overall knowledge you would have received in high school. The Adamses helped Jason prepare for his GED, and Roberta took him out for a haircut to get him ready, but right before the test was scheduled, Nancy decided to move to Dallas about 40 minutes north and took Jason with her. He had only been with the Adamses for 2 weeks, but Roberta said she saw drastic improvement in his personality. In Dallas, Jason was right back in a situation where he had no parental guidance and their apartment was filthy. Visitors described there being insects and even feces on the floor. Jason would write in a journal entry that he wanted to get away from his mother as soon as possible. He was itching to start his campaign of rape, torture, and murder, and every day that went by his hatred of females only increased. He wrote about it constantly in his journal, which he called the Slayer's Book of Death. How edgy. One entry read, quote, "When I'm in public and I see a beautiful woman, I look at her and smile. Then by the expression on her face, I know she's saying that little pimple-faced punk actually has the nerve to look at me. Then I frown and disgust fills that once beautiful face. Most girls in school, too." Jason started working at a Tom Thumb grocery store and became obsessed with a coworker named Lynette. She was a year younger than him and he asked her out, but she turned him down. She said it wasn't a good idea because they worked together, and Jason tried to play it cool, but his emotional instability didn't allow that to last long. Lynette lived in the same apartment complex as Jason, and one morning she found a dead cat on her doorstep. She asked Jason about it, but he claimed it wasn't him. A few days later, she was woken up by a knock on her door early in the morning. It was Jason, and he had a letter for her to read. She invited him in and read the letter, which described his desire to kill her and have sex with her corpse. Then he told her she shouldn't have turned him down and attacked her with a knife. Lynette fought back and managed to get the knife away from Jason. She ran to the door, threw the knife outside, and demanded Jason leave and never come back. Jason did as he was told, and she never saw him again. He stopped showing up to work and was no longer a problem, so Lynette chose not to report the attack to the police. In 1991, Jason became obsessed with a new girl, this one even younger than Anita. Tessie was 10 years old and also lived in the same apartment complex. He had written in his journal originally that he thought Tessie was interested in him, but eventually he decided he needed to kill her because she had rejected him. She was 10. One journal entry read, quote, "I am going to kill Tessie. I hope I'm caught. If not, I won't be able to stop, and I know there will be so many more. I love them all too, but Tessie will be my first. I want to see her face when I cut her throat and drink her blood. Tessie, I love you and I want to kill you and drink your blood. The night after the journal entry, Jason went to Tessie's apartment with the intention of killing her. He couldn't break the window to her bedroom and was afraid he had been heard, so he fled. His next journal entry read, quote, I am about to start my career as a serial killer. Yes, I'm about to start my campaign of mass murder. I will be the best at what I'm to do. Out of all the killers before me, surely I'll be in the ranks of the most high. Outside Jason's poor writing skills, it seemed there was also some conflict about him killing. He went from one entry claiming he hoped to be caught to another claiming he would be ranked high amongst other killers. He went out claiming his intention was to kill Tessie a few other times but never pulled it off and eventually gave up. In June of 1991, Jason was arrested for unlawful possession of a weapon when he was discovered carrying the gun he had obtained in public. At the same time, his mother Nancy was rummaging through Jason's closet when she stumbled onto his current journal. She read through it, and after seeing repeated fantasies about rape and murder, she got Jason out of jail on bond and took him to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where he was admitted for a psychiatric evaluation. The doctor there interviewed both Jason and Nancy and reviewed the journal. In it, there was a list of girls that Jason wanted to kill as well as the police chief of Ennis. That doctor determined that Jason was a danger to himself and others. Not only had he written about wanting to kill, but he had begun to write out specific plans and had acquired weapons. It was clear that his writings were not just angry ranting. Jason was transferred to a psychiatric intensive care unit, but the doctors there disagreed with the prior diagnosis and released him. Jason was put on probation for the weapons charge, and an older woman he had met named Rita had offered to let him move in with her and her 12-year-old daughter Barbara. Jason had stopped keeping a journal for a while, but eventually started again and ended up finding another gun. With that, he and a friend started planning to rob a Popeye's chicken restaurant that Jason had worked at briefly before being fired. In the summer of 1991, they waited outside as the employees inside worked at closing up. When the last employees exited the restaurant, Jason and the friend rushed them and told them to go back inside. They ordered the manager to open the safe and give them the money. Then they told them all to lay face down on the floor for 5 minutes. They ripped the phone out of the wall and smashed it on the floor. They fled from the building and into a nearby neighborhood. They took a little cash out of the bag and hid the rest in some bushes. They didn't want the cash on them in case they got spotted by the police. That didn't happen though. They eventually found a phone booth where they called a cab and got a ride home. 2 days later, they retrieved the rest of the cash and split the $1,500 they had ended up with. By the end of 1991, Rita had realized that Jason was not a safe person to be around. Not only did he talk about raping and murdering young girls, but he told her all about the animals he had killed, even showing her various animal heads he had kept in a shed. One night, he dragged a dog into their bedroom and cut its throat with a butcher knife. Barbara wasn't home, but Rita said she didn't want her daughter to come home and see the blood, so she got rags to clean up. But while she was doing that, Jason took the first dog outside and returned with a second dog and did the same to it. When Jason dragged that poor dead animal out of the house, she ran up and locked the door behind him. Despite Jason having brutally killed 2 dogs in her bedroom, Rita gave in when he begged her to take him back. That seemed to be less about Jason wanting to be with Rita than it was about him wanting to be with Barbara. On January 2, 1992, his journal entry read, quote, I don't want to kill Barbara, but she doesn't love me. She rejected me. She laughed and sneered at me. His plan was delayed when he and Nancy moved back to Ennis in the spring of that year, though. Jason went back and visited Rita, but it wasn't until August that he finally had the opportunity he wanted with Barbara. Jason and Barbara were at home while Rita was out running errands. They were talking in the living room, but when Jason started acting strange, Barbara decided to go to bed. A few minutes after laying down, Jason came into her room and pressed a knife to her throat. He threatened to kill her if she screamed, and then he pulled off her clothes and started undoing his pants. Before he could get any further, though, Rita came into the house and Jason scurried out of the girl's bedroom. Of course, Barbara told her mother what had happened. Rita ordered Jason to leave and told him she would call the police if he ever came back. Jason did as he was told and left, writing about the incident in his journal. Part of it read, quote, "I'm afraid Barbara is going to talk. She told Rita about it, all but the attempted rape, I think. It's going to be a sad time when I have to kill her, but if I can't have her, no one will." For the rest of the year into 1993, Jason did a good job of cleaning himself up. He had stopped drinking and was dating a girl named Marty, who was considered a good church-going girl. She was not willing to have sex with Jason, but he believed the relationship was good for his image. He secretly still fantasized about rape and murder, but to the outside world he was sober, had a good girlfriend, a job, and was about to buy his first car. By the summer of 1993, Jason had purchased a tan 1982 Subaru and was back to drinking and doing drugs. He was still obsessed with the idea of killing every girl who he had any interaction with in the past. Barbara, Anita, Tessie. But it wasn't until he was introduced to a 13-year-old girl named Christina that he would finally get the opportunity. Christina Benjamin was born on August 30th, 1979 in Auburn, New York to Chris and Donna Benjamin. She had one younger sister. She was described as a happy and active child growing up, even after her parents divorced in 1985 and she moved down to Texas with her mother. She was active in school, playing flute in the band and performing in basketball, volleyball, and track. She was popular and got good grades. After moving to Texas, Donna met a man named James King. They began dating and eventually moved into a house together in a small town called Garrett, just north of Ennis. James had a son named Brian who became an older stepbrother to the two Benjamin girls. Brian King was born on September 3, 1978 and was 1 year older than Christina. He was a typical teen boy spending his time outside camping, fishing, and riding his bike. He liked to draw everything from people to scenery. He also wanted to be a comedian when he grew up, and people said he had a knack for celebrity impressions. He had lived with his mother in Terrell for most of his life, and he had moved in with his father only 3 weeks earlier. In the summer of 1993, Christina was preparing to enter high school as a freshman, and Brian was anxious to start at a new school. Still, the teens were enjoying their break, taking advantage of the warm evenings to hang out with friends. In the early morning hours of July 27th, the teens had been picked up by a mutual friend, but they never returned home. James would later tell investigators that he awoke to the sound of a car horn that morning and saw his son on the front porch talking to a boy in a car who had long, scruffy blonde hair. He said he went to the restroom, and when he came back, the car was gone and so was Brian. He assumed the boy was going for a cruise with his friend and went back to sleep. It wasn't until the morning that he and Donna realized that Christina was also gone. Donna told investigators that she had checked on the girls who shared a room at about 10 o'clock when she went to bed and they were both asleep. The parents had no reason to believe the kids had run away, so they waited for them to return, but they didn't. The following morning they reported both of the teens missing. The bodies were found the day after that, and in the boy's pocket was a wallet with a library card belonging to Brian King. One detective remembered a report of 2 missing teens the day before and put the cases together. They couldn't be positive about the female remains as there was no head or hands, but it was highly likely that it was Christina. When detectives interviewed the parents, James confirmed that the wallet belonged to his son. Christina's little sister explained that Brian had come into their room, woke up Christina and said, quote, "Come on, let's go before someone wakes up." The investigators got hair from Christina's hairbrush to match hairs found on a barbed wire fence at the scene. The hair would come back a match. The autopsy would find that, on top of the mutilation of Christina's body, she also suffered a gunshot wound to her back. A .22 caliber bullet was recovered from her body. The exact cause of death was not possible to estimate without the head present. Brian's autopsy revealed 2 gunshot wounds to his body, one to his upper head and one to his face. 2 .22 caliber bullets were recovered from his body. There were no other wounds on his body, and it was determined his cause of death was the gunshots. A forensic technician found a tan carpet fiber on one of Brian's shoes that he determined was from a Japanese vehicle. 2 days after the bodies were discovered, the police received an anonymous phone call where a male voice told them the person they were looking for was Jason Massey. The same day, a detective talked to a teen named Mark Gentry, who was one of the people said to hang out with Brian. Mark wasn't involved in the murders because he was in jail for unauthorized use of a vehicle, but he might have information that could help the investigation. When the detective asked him if he could think of anybody who would want to hurt Brian and Christina, Mark gave him the name Jason Massey. 2 people saying the same person was involved on the same day was not a coincidence. From there, the detective interviewed another teenager who was friends with both Jason and Christina. Chris Nowlin told authorities that he had introduced Jason to Christina a couple weeks before the murders, and Jason was clearly interested in her. He later told Chris that he wanted to, quote, fuck her, kill her, cut her pussy lips off, fry them, and eat them. Chris said he ignored the claims because Jason was known to be weird. When those statements were paired with Jason's record, once having been investigated for stalking Anita and once being investigated for mutilating a calf, authorities were sure that he was their murderer. With the statements, the description of Jason's vehicle, and a testimony that Jason was in the area of Brian and Christina's home on the evening of July 26th, authorities got a search warrant for Jason Massey's home. On August 2, 1993, Jason was arrested and charged with capital murder. A search of the home uncovered a massive library of books on serial killers as well as police investigation techniques. They found knives and a set of handcuffs with blood on them. Outside, when investigators searched his car, they found it surprisingly clean. His buddies had said it was usually trashed, but it looked as though Jason had recently scrubbed the car down. The vehicle was towed to the sheriff's department for further analysis. When Jason was interrogated, he claimed that he had never killed anyone, not even animals. He said that Mark Gentry had lied about him because he thought Jason was messing around with his ex-girlfriend. Then he suddenly claimed that someone else had murdered Brian and Christina, but he knew where the mystery killer had buried Christina's head and hands. They packed up a caravan of vehicles with various law enforcement agents and Jason and drove out to a rural area Jason's direction. After hours of hiking through the dark woods, poking around at various spots pointed out by the suspect, the whole group returned to the sheriff's office empty-handed. Jason talked to the detectives a little longer, then claimed he wanted to go to sleep. The following morning, Jason conferred with a lawyer and was no longer willing to speak with detectives. When Jason's car was inspected by forensic technicians, they took samples of the carpet and found several spots that turned out to be blood, and there were also blood spots on a hammer, a roll of duct tape, and a knife. When Jason's movements were tracked, they found that he had been at a Walmart prior to the murders where he had purchased a pair of handcuffs and .22 caliber bullets. It's wild the things that Walmart employees can ring up without thinking it's suspicious. Anyway, it turned out that Jason had purchased those bullets when he had made plans with another young girl named Christina Irwin to go out in the woods and shoot his gun. That girl testified that Jason was looking for a specific spot, but after enough time had passed and he couldn't find it, he took the girl home. She described the area as being near where the bodies were found, and it's believed that she was going to be his first victim, but he lost his nerve. She testified that he had a .22 caliber revolver with him during that time. When investigators interviewed more of Jason's family, they learned that one of his cousins had owned a .22 caliber revolver which he had packed in a box and stored at a house where Jason and his family was living while he was in the process of moving. That was only about a week and a half before the murders. Jason had taken his journals and some severed animal heads and hidden them in the woods. But the psychiatrist who Jason had seen years before had kept copies of his journals from back then, and he turned them over to the prosecution. The entries about killing a young girl and decapitating her showed that Jason had planned to do exactly what had happened to Christina. On top of that, Anita's father turned over the letters that Jason had sent his daughter. One of the images that had been in a letter showed a picture of a woman who he had cut out of a magazine. Jason had cut it in half through the middle of the woman's body, shockingly similar to how Christina had been cut open. The trial began in October of 1994, and the evidence against Jason was strong. The prosecutor was seeking the death penalty. Investigators had never found Christina's head or hands, and they had never found the gun. Still, multiple people had seen Jason with the gun, and the bullets he had purchased from Walmart matched the bullets recovered from the victims. The tan fiber found on Brian's shoe matched the carpet in Jason's car, and blood stains in Jason's car matched Christina's DNA. Brian's father, James, testified that it was Jason's car that he had seen outside his home in the early morning hours of July 27th. The judge determined that Jason's journal and the letters to Anita were admissible, so the jury heard how Jason had fantasized about exactly what had happened to Christina. The defense simply argued that Jason did not commit the murder. Everything the prosecutor had said was just one big coincidence. In the mid-90s, DNA was still not entirely understood by most people, so he shrugged that off, not understanding how damning it actually was. It was during the prosecution's closing argument that the assistant prosecutor got notified of a new discovery. A hiker had discovered an old cooler in the woods, and inside were a number of severed animal heads as well as Jason's journals. Those journals contained even more incriminating entries, describing his plans to kill Barbara in the same way Christina was killed. The prosecutor's case was so strong, though, that they chose not to delay the trial by asking to introduce new evidence, and the jury was sent off to deliberate. It only took them 3 hours to find Jason Massey guilty. It was during the sentencing phase that the newly discovered journal entries were introduced. After hearing them, there wasn't much the defense could say to save Jason from the needle. It only took the jury 15 minutes to decide that Jason Massey should be put to death. Jason spent about 7 years on death row where, surprise, surprise, he converted to Christianity. He was executed by lethal injection on April 3, 2001, at the age of 28. Some people want to claim Jason Massey was born evil, and he may have always had an inclination to do evil, but the abuse and neglect he suffered from his parents can't be ignored. I don't believe anybody is just born into evil. Something in their life must push them in that direction, and Jason's father having abandoned him and his mother neglecting him wasn't a benign experience. Jason may have been born with the ability to become a monster, but his upbringing pushed him toward it. Thanks for watching This Is Monsters. New episodes are uploaded twice a week on Mondays and Thursdays. There are occasional bonus episodes covering unsolved cases and criminal history. If you have a suggestion for a case you think I should cover, leave it in the comments. You can always follow the channel on Instagram at thisis_monsters and purchase merch at thisismonsters.com. Thanks so much, and be safe.